Okay, welcome to San Francisco Independent Short Film Festival. My name is Kate. I work for a company called Festival Formula based in the UK. And today we'll be speaking to some of the filmmakers featured in the LGBTQ Stories program. I believe we have everyone. Lou Jurgens of This Body Project should be joining us at some point, but if unfortunately Lou can't, it's a fantastic film, like all the other films here, and you should definitely watch it. So I'm going to start with a little icebreaker question for everyone. What is your snack of choice whilst watching films? I'm going to start with Nathaniel because you were late.
Okay. It just depends. When we were able to go to the movie theater, I enjoyed getting nachos with cheese, even though I know it was unhealthy. But since I'm at home, I still do nachos, but I made guacamole.
Nice, lovely.
Yeah.
What about you, Will? What's your snack of choice in watching movies?
Oh wow, I'm a big fan of the sour gummy candies.
Okay.
Sour Patch Kids, Sour Patch Kids watermelon, sour belts, pretty much anything like covered in sugar and sour tasting is what I like to do at the movie theater. Yeah.
Nice. What about you, Manu? Do you like eating during a film?
No, generally not.
No.
I'm focused on the film.
Yeah, I think in Europe they take it a lot more seriously. It's no eating during
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe.
What about you, Danielle?
Sorry, Danielle.
Oh, sorry. Oh, there's two Daniels and Danielle. Okay.
Sorry about that.
Would one of you like to be called Danny?
I'll be Dan.
Okay. Danielle, what's your snack of choice?
I just probably basic popcorn.
Nice. Are you sweet, toffee, salty, or?
Whoa, just the basic like salt. Yeah.
Yeah.
I like fancy, it. Then maybe a bit of like, I don't know, olive oil and truffle salt I discovered at some point. It's amazing.
Oh, nice. Very nice. Danny, what about you? Snack of choice?
Like 1940s Hollywood style, so like popcorn, butter, Coca-Cola. I like the traditional down the road.
Nice.
And I watched the film, but I also stuffed my face with the popcorn at the same time.
It's definitely depending on the type of film that you're watching. If you're watching a Hollywood sort of blockbuster Marvel film, you've got to have popcorn with a drink. Yeah. But I definitely pick like a medium-sized drink, because if I pick the large drink, I'll definitely be like running out of the theatre, having to pee halfway through. Okay, awesome. So now that I know where you all come from, feel free to tell the audience where you're living. I was curious to find out, does where you live have an effect on the type of films that you make? Danny? Does it have like an influence of the kind of films that you want to make?
I think where I grew up and how I grew up hugely has an influence on the type of films that I make. I moved around a lot and did not live in LA until the last 4 years, but I also love old Hollywood and I love classic film, and so I'm very inspired by that. It's not the style like I would say High Life or Midsommar is more like what I try to make, but I also love watching Philadelphia Stories. So it's like, and I really do love the classics, and I live in Los Feliz in Los Angeles, which is kind of the mecca of old silent Hollywood. And so every other house, is part of that. And so I really love the history of that.
Definitely. Do you have a favorite silent film that you can recommend to us if you haven't seen it?
Oh my gosh.
Or can you think, or one that inspired you instead of a favorite?
Yeah, I love all the Chaplin and Buster Keaton stuff. Like I love early Buster Keaton is my favorite. And so I watched that a lot. But early Chaplin, early Buster Keaton, um, Lorette Taylor, the great American theater actor, did a silent film of Peg of My Heart that she was very famous for on Broadway.
Oh,
And
okay.
just to see her is extraordinary because most people don't know who she is if they, weren't alive at the time she was on stage. And she's extraordinary. So
I'll check that out. What's that film called again?
I
Peg of
think
My
it is
Heart.
called Peg of My Heart, which I think is the play is called Peg of My Heart, but I believe that the film is also that.
Awesome. Thank you. Nathaniel, where do you live, and does that have an influence over the kind of films that you make?
I'm in Brooklyn, New York, and for me, the only thing that's really, well, for me, the environment kind of gives me images to pull from when I'm creating the story. But for me, as a young actor and writer and producer, was the only thing that's really influencing is budget. What kind of film I can create as of right now. Or while I still try to write with without any limitation on my imagination. But then when we start pulling together a team, that's when it's like, okay, how much of this is feasible?
Cool. Yeah, definitely. Budget is a.
Yeah.
It's so boring and tedious, and yet the budget can like make or break dreams.
Yeah. Yeah.
Manu, you're from France and Paris. Does that have an influence on the type of films that you make, and why?
I'm not from Paris. I'm from the countryside in the southwest,
Okay.
very close to the Atlantic Ocean. And yes, because in the short film I was shot in the dunes and the forest and the ocean side. So of course, yes.
Where was that? Where was the film set?
Very, very close to the border with Spain. Some place that you could know is Biarritz, maybe in the southwest of France.
It's
Okay.
a lot of surfers go there, don't
Yes,
they?
yes. Also, Biarritz is a place where people, it's mecca of surf in Europe.
Ah, very cool. Will, is where you live had a big influence?
I mean, yes, because when I grew up there and I had my first sexual experiences there in the dunes with a girl first and then with a guy.
Oh,
So
okay.
the fact of showing people having sex in the dunes somehow is a kind of making a fantasy.
Yeah.
Sorry?
That's part of your memory then.
Yeah, it's not only my memory, it's more a fantasy, but this fantasy takes place, I mean, it takes root in my memories. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. That's really cool. It's not too sandy then to
Yeah, it's sandy, but having sex in the sun sometimes is can be uncomfortable, but when the sun is hot I mean heaten by the sun on summertime, it's a good place to have sex,
lovely.
to enjoy life.
What's the name of this place again?
It sounds like P-Town.
Yes, it's very look-alike P-Town in terms of geology, yes, and geography.
Yeah,
It's very look-alike. Yeah,
that's great.
pines and dunes and beaches, sandy beach.
Lovely. It looks beautiful in the film. So
Thank you.
I have to check out this place.
Yeah,
Lou Jurgens is joining us now, so I'm going to add her in, or him in. Might be Lou. Hello.
Hi, I'm so sorry I'm late. I just
Hello.
Don't worry. That's absolutely fine. I was just in middle of asking a question, but I'll ask you the same question in a bit, if that's okay. Will, how has the place where you live influenced your work and your filmmaking?
Well, I'm not sure. I'm more of an actor and less of a writer. So,
Okay.
I feel like the place you are always influences your work. I mean, at least for Daniel and I, and this is like it started with the story, and then we sort of incorporated the place after that, you know. So I feel like it probably depends on the project that you're working on, you know. But for me, it was like it always started with the story first, and then incorporating the place after that.
Okay, cool. Danielle, same question. How's your where you grew up influenced your work and your filmmaking?
Yeah, it's where I grew up is the opposite of where I live now. It was back in like the 80s in a small town in Alberta, which I guess in the States would be like the equivalent of Oklahoma, probably is my guess. Like very rural, just like golden fields, just so homogenous. And so it's really affected, I think it affected me a lot growing up because we always felt like the family that was like the odd ones out. And then so now I live in, oh, that sounded so Canadian, out. And then and then I've lived in like larger cities. I'm now in Vancouver, and it's the opposite feeling where there's just so much variety. There's so many different types of people, and it's definitely had an impact in that sense. I don't know.
Awesome. Lou, the question was, how has where you from anyway, or where you live, how does that affect or influence your filmmaking style?
That's a great question. I feel like my history of the different places I've lived probably affects it more than the city I live in now. I live in Toronto, from Canada. And but I was born in the UK, and my parents actually lived in South Africa, and we emigrated from Cape Town to a rural coal mining town in northern British Columbia near the Rockies in Canada when I was very, very a wee one. And so yeah, I grew up in small towns, but we would go back a lot because our whole family was between the UK and South Africa. So there was like a lot of flying around, and I had my eyes open to a lot of stuff at a young age. And so that really broadened my experience. So somehow I was sort of getting, in some ways I was getting a small town education, but then in other ways I was seeing the total opposite in the way that I was being educated. So I think that probably is why I chose to be an artist, because I felt like there was some bullshit going on, and I wanted to try to express the different things I was feeling that was in opposition to my education. So yeah, and I would say like the people that I have met in the city of Toronto have been the most inspiring to me. The people that I've met and the artists that are here are totally influenced my work.
Can you recommend any artists for a
I would recommend Glam Drew Henderson, but sadly they have passed. But otherwise, yeah, there's an amazing artist here named B. Young, who creates an incredible work, mostly theater. And then, oh my gosh, there's so many other ones. There's a phenomenal artist who's actually in the UK now, but she's Canadian, Mae Martin, who created the Feel Good series on Netflix.
Oh, really? Oh,
yeah. Toronto.
It's all happening in Toronto. Oh, that's awesome. I'll check those guys out.
Yeah, cool.
So we're going to get into the nitty-gritty now. What is the inspiration, the story behind your film specifically that are screening at this film festival? And I'm going to start with Daniel and Will. What was the inspiration behind Light?
Well, Will and I, first of all, Will and I are family, so we work together all the time, and it actually was a theater commission in New York.
Barrow Street, yeah.
Barrow Street, and a long time ago, but it came from actually a conversation of standing behind a guy in Starbucks. I was in a really, really bad mood. It was the Starbucks in the West Village, and this guy was like, just every stereotype that I was being a jerk about in my head, and like Wall Street bro guy and all that. And I realized at some point he was really loudly talking on his phone. I realized at some point he was talking to his husband, and it totally shattered my perception of who he was. And also, but it was really brutal how he was talking about it. He was just it was unlike anything I had heard. And so I was very fascinated with it, and then wanted to write about that in a way, and try to kind of get under the skin of someone who I was just had my own prejudice about, who he was, and try to write from his perspective, and be his honor the brutality as much as possible, and kind of the brutality towards his husband, but at the same time try to see him as a human being. And so that's where it came from. And the film is, it is that way. Like, when you look at it, you're like, I sit there and hear some of the stuff that comes out of the guy's mouth, and I'm just like, oh my God. But I think it's honest to the character. And
yeah, you definitely
to it.
watch the film thinking, like, you're an asshole, like, what's wrong with you? But you also want to find out, but why are you an asshole? Like, who hurt you?
Yeah, and then in the end, we're all really human and really fallible,
Exactly.
And so I wanted, instead of writing at that, I wanted to try to write into that and through that, and look at the homophobia, the self-homophobia, in that way.
It was important to me to capture the kind of polarizing struggle of masculinity in the piece. That this idea that the way he's presents himself, and you see him at the beginning, and then at the end of the film you sort of see him for who he is, which is just like a little kid, hiding under his bed, afraid of the dark. And how he has to grapple with all of that, which Daniel wrote so beautifully. So it's hard to watch sometimes, but it's important. I feel like it's important to.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's a narrative that doesn't really get talked about that often in LGBTQ films.
Especially right now, it's interesting. Especially right now, it's like there can be such an attack on having to look at characters like that, like characters that we don't empathize with or agree with, and trying to instead of like turn them into a stereotype and kind of comment on them politically and hold ourselves at a distance, like to actually go into it and try to find the humanity of what that's about. We've had some interesting responses to it. Like I've had friends, my wife hates it. So she absolutely was like so uncomfortable by that film, but it was important to me to kind of try to understand it and try to kind of live in that skin and see if I could do that. And, and also just like we wanted to do something during quarantine, and this was like the thick of quarantine. Like Will and I were up in Vancouver, and we got like sent back. Will got sent back to Chicago. I got sent back to LA. And so we shot it. He shot it all by himself in an iPhone 7. I directed via FaceTime, and it was him and I in a car in a parking lot in Chicago, and I was in Los Angeles, and so it also lent itself to that. And we borrowed from kind of Truffaut, and like, just like it, it's definitely shot on an iPhone. And some people are like, why'd you shoot this on iPhone? I was like, we were in quarantine. That's what we had. Like there was no place to go rent a camera, it's like, and so it was really just fun to be able to do work when everyone
That's
was
awesome. And it just goes to show you can be creative when you're limited with what you have.
It was really fun.
Okay, awesome. Thank you, guys. Nathaniel, what's the inspiration story behind your film?
Well, for me, it was basically based on a true story. So,
is it autobiographical, or is it?
Yeah, pretty much. I say like 90% of it is, and the rest is like, just fantasy and just a little bit of an embellishment. But Yeah, pretty autobiographical. So that's where that piece came from. And then for me, it was just about seeing it through to the end and actually bringing it to life as opposed to writing it, because it was actually written maybe 2 years before I was produced, and just finally produced it last year around this time.
So you directed it, produced it, starred in it.
Well, no, I didn't direct it. The directors weren't able to be a part of the call, but I did write and produced it and starred in it.
Is it quite hard work having an idea that you've had in your head for so long to finally get it out there, or is it actually quite liberating to finally?
It's liberating, but I think when you just have it on paper, sometimes for me it's like, okay, how is this actually gonna come to life, and who's gonna help me and support me? Because at the time I had never produced anything. I'd always been in front of the camera, thankfully, or on stage. You know, that's like, for me, being mostly an actor, like that's not the stuff that they teach you in school, how to transition in between jobs if you have that desire to move from actor to director, or from actor to producer, or even a cameraman.
Yeah.
So I just have really had to use the help of other people who I'd worked with. Like the director I had worked with on a web series, so he was interested in this project and was able to help me bring it to life.
I think it these days especially, it helps to be a jack of all trades with all this. You know, most film festivals I go to, everyone is saying, I'm an actor, I'm a writer, I'm a producer, I'm a director, and I think that's a positive thing, because it just shows that you have skills that can be stretched into other regions. Thank you, Nathaniel. Danielle, what was the inspiration behind your film Falling In?
Well, it's based on my real life experience. So that's where it came from. My dad came out to me when he was in his 60s. So he lived his whole life closeted, and so that's the gist of it. But I had this image this one day when I was walking of this little girl on some front steps with her dad braiding her hair. Because when I was young at school, when I was like, oh, my dad braids my hair, because they're like, oh, who did your French braid? And I said, oh, my dad did it. But I lived in this really small, like, it's almost like the people were stuck in, you know, way back, like in the 50s or something. So all the kids would make fun of me because they're like, dads can't braid hair. And now, of course, everyone, this is like common everywhere. But so I had this vision of this dad braiding the hair in this area that's just like, there's nothing around. So they just have that bond, that relationship. And it just kind of came as a vision. And then I had no idea how to write it into a script. So all the writing I've ever done have been more like short stories. And so I co-wrote it with Michelle Neal. And she's a great writer. So she helped me bring it into the writing portion. And that's where the little seed started from.
Yeah. Awesome. Thank you. Lou, I mean, I know it's, your film must be quite, was this topic a friend of yours, or someone you knew? So it must be quite a personal piece, but I'd still love to know how you came about making the film.
Yeah, for sure. So I think the source of it was, I would say maybe about 11 years ago or more. I knew I was queer from a young age, but I really struggled to accept it and be comfortable with it, particularly where the industry is concerned. And so I get on my own journey of my own relationship to my body. I started to do a photography project where we were taking portraits of people and interviewing them about what their relationship with their body is like. And so initially this project was just, you know, born out of my own fraught road of self-acceptance. And I had interviewed and photographed quite a few people with other photographers and other artists involved. And we would just do galleries where we would put the written pieces up, asking people what their relationship is with their body, and the photos. And sometimes we would put up audio where people would record themselves speaking what they had written. And slowly but surely, all of these aspects of it was moving slowly towards film, was moving slowly towards why don't we just film and interview people instead of doing all of these written and still photography projects. So my dear friend Andrew, who also goes by Glamdrew, had just been diagnosed with lymphoma, and his pronouns are he, but he also used they, so I'll probably switch between those two. He agreed to do the project, and we, at the time, a dear friend of mine who's an amazing DP said, why don't we try this interview with Andrew to be the first one that we actually film? And so that's what we did. We just pulled it together. There were only two of us, so we, like, I guess you could say, produced and directed the whole thing. And I put together the series of interview questions, and Glamdrew was just the most generous person with their time, went into so many different subject matters about life that is quite profound, and passed away relatively soon after that interview. And so that was the source of the inspiration and how it got rolling. And it's such a universal subject matter that I feel like we're probably going to do more. Like, we'll probably just keep interviewing people about this. And yeah, Glamdrew was extremely helpful for me to talk to, just even as an interviewer, in terms of being a real source of inspiration of how to accept yourself, especially when you find yourself in the shoes that Glamdrew found themselves in, which was, I'm gonna die and I don't have that much longer to live. And so knowing that, you know, fuck fear, and just went and lived their life to the max and just changed all of the things that he had been holding back on, basically.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It's a long-winded answer to your question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. Don't worry. Don't worry at all. It was very emotional. Manu, what's the inspiration behind Kiku's Saints?
So on the beginning, I have to say I am the director of photography of two directors in France. They are Ducastel and Martineau. And the last film I shot, and the two last film, one of them is Theo et Hugo, Paris 5.59. And so it's a story about two guys that meet in a sex club. And those two directors told me that once they were screening their films, an old film in Japan, they do queer cinema, queer movies, and their fans in Japan were women, straight women who loved to fantasizing about gay men sexuality, love. Wow. And so there is something which is, I know from some of my friends, girls, that they can, and are straight, they can have this kind of fantasy to see gay guys having sex. I mean, we can have the same with straight guys that have the fantasy of lesbian girls having sex. I mean, it exists in both sides. And but the fact is, the industry and the patriarchat made, the porno industry and the patriarchat made one very famous, and the other side not so much. But the funny thing is that in Japan you have artist drawers that are women, and they draw manga. I don't know, you know, manga,
Yeah.
like gay manga with gay guys having sex for a woman, straight woman audience.
Okay.
So it's a very very specific stuff,
Yeah.
and that inspired me,
Oh,
and somehow.
oh, it's
And it was, I
awesome.
mean, it was also the other inspiration was it's well, it's not really I think it's not a gay film in the meaning that the thematic, the main thematic of the film is more it's the story of a woman that escaped from patriarchy, you know, patriarchy, and so it's more a feminist movie, but with a lot of gay homoerotism.
Yeah, definitely. I would call it a feminist
Clear?
movie. Absolutely.
I don't know if it's clear because my English is not so fluent
No,
than
no,
you
no, no.
guys. So.
That makes perfect sense. It made perfect sense to me. I hope it made
Okay.
So I have one more question. And I really love asking this question in Q&As because I'm always so interested to hear what people have to say. Do you think filmmakers have a responsibility to culture? And I'm going to start with Lou. What do you think?
Oh yeah, I think filmmakers have one of the biggest responsibilities, if not the top responsibility, because I feel like culture is so influenced by film and TV and media. And I know definitely the stuff I was watching when I was growing up, I wished that I had seen subject matters and stories with deeper meaning and with other options just besides the myopic viewpoint of like a really heteronormative, really white, privileged white picket fence box. So I think it's a huge responsibility, and I think there can be a lot of damage done if there's not enough truth being told, if there's not enough diversity, if you know, I think it's huge.
Awesome, perfect answer. Danny and Will, what do you think? Do filmmakers have a responsibility to culture?
I think you're part of culture. I think we're all part of culture. Like you can't kind of you can't separate yourself from the culture and from the world that you live in. And I think we have a responsibility to tell honestly our stories so that becomes part of culture, and also to tell it bravely and to tell the ugly as well as, you know, to not control the narrative, but to be vulnerable and true about the narrative, as true as we can. And that becomes part of culture. I think it's the same thing that Lou was saying, that it's really important to get stories out there in that way, you know, and I think it's happening a little bit more, you know, but it needs to happen a lot more. So, you know, and but I think you can't. We kind of we're what make up the fabric of culture, you know. So we have to find a way to get our stories through, no matter what. And that's the thing is and be willing to kind of go, look, if the studio system in America isn't going to do that, if, you know, Warner Brothers or A24 isn't going to produce that, we now have the technology and the ability to make our own films and get them out there. And so it's really on us to get those stories out there, you know.
Definitely. Nathaniel, what do you think? Do we have a responsibility to culture as filmmakers?
I think as artists, we have a responsibility to challenge culture and use our art form to express what maybe the marginalized thoughts may not be able to express, and also challenge like groupthink and use our tools that we have to uplift culture and thought.
Awesome. Manu, what do you think? Do filmmakers have responsibility to culture?
Yes, but I would say that we mustn't be focused into doing culture when we are making a film. I think personally that when I wrote this film or when I'm writing something else, I'm more focused about telling a story than having the feeling that I'm producing culture. But of course, cinema is part of the main art, and in those main art, this is the more accessible for the audience, like music, poesy, mathematics, astronomy. All these are art, but they are not very accessible to everyone. While cinema is very, very, very accessible to all. So yes, we have to. We do culture, yes.
Yeah.
Despite ourselves, we are producing part of culture, even if all films are not art piece.
Definitely, I agree. Danielle, what do you think?
Oh, just definitely. Of course, we have responsibility. It used to be, I think the concept was that art holds a mirror up to society, but now I think we're realizing that it actually affects society at the same time. So there's a responsibility to, as Nathaniel said, uplift society through your art or whatever you're making.
Perfect. Will, did you want to add anything there? I know you're part of the same team as Danny, so if you want to add anything, please do.
No, I think, yeah, I mean, to answer your question, yeah, I think any artist has a massive responsibility to culture, especially right now. I mean, in the States, especially right now, I feel like.
Definitely. Well, the whole world. Definitely we could do a bit of cheering up. We could do a bit of a community feeling for sure. And film, you know, with phones and technology now, it's never been easier to pick up your phone and record something and tell a story. And since both you guys filmed your film on was it an iPhone 7?
It was. I was about to hold this one up, but this isn't the one we use. The phone we used has been retired now, so it was really beat up.
Tired during the filming.
It was on its last legs when we made the film. But
well, it just goes to show like anyone can do it. I mean, I think everyone has a story inside them to tell. So to have these tools to be able to tell them, I think is awesome. I would love to spend longer chatting to everyone and asking questions. I had loads, but I've gone over and I'm restricted to half an hour, so I'm probably going to get into trouble for that. But oh well. But thank you all so much for joining and answering the questions. I hope you all have a lovely festival, and thank you for making such awesome films.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So much.
Thanks so much for having us.
Bye, you guys.
Nice to meet you all.
Happy fall. Have a great weekend.
You too. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Bye.